Hi everyone, welcome to the tutorial for the fillet block. I'm going to show you how to use the dimensions that are given in the activity to create a 3D model of an L-shaped block, and then we will apply fillets, which are rounding off those sharp edges on wooden blocks, and we'll look at some different sizes that we can do with the filleting. We will need this block also for the chamfer part of the activity. So what we'll do is we'll create the block and we'll save it as two different files. We'll save it as the chamfer and we'll save it as the fillet. So we can just reuse the block. Okay, let's go to Inventor. It may take you a minute for Inventor to boot up. This is where we're going to be, and we're going to create a brand new part. So we're going to click on Part and wait for it to load. While that's loading, I'm going to pull up I'm going to try. Yeah, here we go. I'm going to pull up the image that we're going to be using. So this is from the activity. It says reproduce the sketch shown below. So here is our sketch on graph paper that shows us the full dimensions. We see that it's 1.5 inches tall, and the upper part is 0.5 inches. And I know based on how these blocks work, this is also, the height here is 0.5 inches, even though I'm not told. So it says apply the dimensions and constraints as shown in the image, and then extrude the sketch to a depth of 1.5. So this extrusion to this depth is our third dimension. So we'll sketch this out, and then when we make it into a 3D model, we will extrude. So this dimension here is 1.5. And then we will apply these fillets here. It looks like they are going to be 1/4 inch right here, 0.25 inches. And that will be to this top and bottom edges, but also filling in here. So we're going to have this edge, and this one rounded off, either by removing material on these two corner edges or filling in material here and the back. And that should do it. So 1.5 tall, 0.5 for thickness, width of the upper part and height of the lower part. Okay, here's Inventor. We're ready to go now. We're going to start with a 2D sketch. We had this in the introduction video where we get to choose the plane. I generally choose the XY plane, since that's the one we use in algebra and geometry. And now I'm going to, I can either use a rectangle tool or I can use a line tool. I think for simplicity, we're going to use the line tool. Now when you use the line tool, you're basically just drawing straight lines. The trick is to make sure they're parallel, either vertically or horizontally. So we'll see this little symbol here that pops up as I draw the line. It pops up and it shows me, it's got a little red bar right here. And that symbol tells me that it is, in fact, vertical. And now you'll notice the symbol that pops up over here in the corner. It tells me it's perpendicular. So this line is completely vertical, and if it's perpendicular, that means this line is perfectly horizontal. That's what we want. And then I'm going to go up to about right here. Try not to put anything on the axis. Oh, and by the way, don't ever start anything at the origin. That kind of locks you into a point, and we don't want to be locked in. So we're going to go and we're going to finish out my sketch. I'm just clicking as I go. I'll go back and add dimensions later. So just kind of get a rough outline. Now notice as I go up, if I slow down and go slowly vertically, I get a little dotted line that pops up. And that little dotted line that pops up at the top tells me I have met the opposite side. So I am now at the right height. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to come straight across. And you notice how the dot turns green when I go to connect? See where my cursor is? It goes across and turns green. That means we're in the right place. So we click. And now the part is finished. Now this is called a closed loop because it goes all the way around and reconnects with itself. In order to do an extrusion, you must have a closed loop. So we must make sure that all of these corners are connected properly in order to have a closed loop so that we can make a 3D model so that you can extrude into the third dimension. Now, let's apply dimensions. So we go up here to the dimension button, click on dimension, and I'm going to do the height here. So notice when I hover over the line, it turns green. Basically, do you want to select this line? And I click once. And then I move my mouse out to the left. I don't want to put dimensions on the part. I want to put them out to the side. And I'm going to click once. And it says the dimension is 0.718762. I want 1.500. And then hit enter. And so now I have my height set at 1.5. I want my width also at 1.5. 1.500. And then the last little piece was this part here. Should be at 0.500. And if you want to double check, then you go back to our image here. Let's zoom in a little bit. So there's the 0.500 and the 1.5. Now, I just know how this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be symmetric. 0.5 for the height, 0.5 for the width. And that's what this little equal sign right here. So this is equal to this. They are the same size. This equal sign for this line makes it equal to this one. So they're the same size. These little symbols mean parallel. So this is parallel to this. This one makes it parallel to this. This makes it perpendicular. Now, you don't have to apply all these geometric constraints because as you draw the part, the computer kind of does that for you. And so if we go through and finish dimensioning this is 0.5 here. So this is 0.5 width, 0.5 height, 1.5. So now I have my dimensions correct. I can show these different geometric constraints. There's my equal sign. There's my parallel sign. Up here is my horizontal constraint to make that line horizontal. Here's the vertical constraint to make a line completely vertical. And so there's some other stuff. I can actually right-click and show the constraints. Well, I say I can. It's not doing it right now. There we go. Right-click. Here's my right-click menu. So maybe, show all constraints. And so there we go. That's a vertical constraint. There's a perpendicular constraint. This right here. These are the main ones that you need to worry about. Now, we could have set these equal to each other by using the equal button. And that would have forced this one to be 0.5 because that one's 0.5. But that's not something necessary right this second. Okay, so we have finished the sketch. I'm going to turn off the constraints, hide all constraints. And then I'm going to finish sketch. So there we've turned the sketch to isometric view. If I click the corner of the cube, that forces it into full isometric. And then now we're going to extrude. If you recall, the instructions said to extrude a depth of 1.5. Right now, the depth is set at 1.0. That's what this is. So I want to change that to 1.5. Hit enter. And OK. And there we have it. That's the profile. That's the front view. And you notice here on the cube, it tells you it's the front view. Isometric view. Right side view. The left side view. And I'm looking at the words here. Go back to the isometric view. There's what my top view looks like. Except it should be rotated this way. There's your top view. Front view. Right side view. And isometric. So those are the 4 big ones. Okay. This is our fillet block and our chamfer block. So I'm going to go to File. I'm going to Save As. And I'm going to save them on my desktop. That's where I save them. You might want to save them on your OneDrive or save them somewhere remotely on the cloud so that if your computer crashes, you don't lose your files. So I'm going to save it as, oh, yeah, I can say chamfer block. Chamfer block. There we go. Save. Now, I'm going to go back once that saves, and I'm going to save the file again. This time, I'm going to go to Save As again, and I'm going to change the name to Fillet, F-I-L-L-E-T, Fillet block. Save. So I should have 2 files, a chamfer block file and a fillet block file. So those are my 2 files. Okay, now let's apply fillets. So your fillet button is right here. There's your fillet button. Chamfer is right next to it. Now, based on the size of the buttons, this is big, that one's small. Which one do you think people use most often? Of course, they use the fillet button most often. That's why it's larger, because it's more frequently used. So once again, this is a very intuitive layout. Little details like that. So I'm going to apply a fillet. So I click the fillet button, and now the window asks, what edge do I want to use? And how big should it be? So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to click this edge. Notice it turned green, and now it's changed. Let's look at the front view. See how it's rounded that off? Let's go back to isometric. I want to make that 0.25. That's what the instructions said. So 0.25 radius, and that's the first one. I can now either click OK and do that same process 2 more times, or better yet, I can just click 2 more edges. I'm going to click this edge, and I'm going to click this edge, because I wanted to keep them all the same. And then click Apply, and OK. Now don't worry about all those extra stripes. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to see what happens when you apply a fillet. It rounds this off into an arc. And that's an arc. And that's an arc. So we've gone from having solid corners or sharp corners to arcs. If you remember the Automoblocks vehicles, they were done the same way. If you imagine that that center body piece where the people would sit, you imagine that being a rectangular wooden block. But when you have it as a toy, those sharp corners have been rounded off like this. And imagine if it's a toy for a 5-year-old, you don't want sharp edges where they could hurt themselves. It also prevents splinters. It makes it a lot more difficult to get a splinter if the edges have been rounded off. Okay, so that's our fillet block. We're going to leave that like that. Let's save what we've got. So maybe you go back to File and Save As again. And make sure it's called fillet block. And then click Save. Do you want to replace it? Yes. And I'm going to close. Now, be careful. When you close out of a part, you click the X here on the gray field. Do not click the X at the very top. That will shut Inventor. You just want to shut the part. Or you can go down here at the bottom. Maybe that's better. Maybe that'll keep you from accidentally closing Inventor. Go to the fillet block and just X out and say yes. And say OK. And it's not working. Save changes to fillet block? No, we've already saved them once. Now let's open our well, I'll save the chamfer for another video. Let's just stop there. So that's your fillet block. We will make a drawing sheet, but that's another lesson. All right. Hope you tune back in for the chamfer block.